Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Good morning, still on my side of the country, but welcome to ITN Live for this Sunday, August the 9th. I'm your host, James Hicks. Today we have another very special guest to me, my cousin-in-law. I guess that's how we should officially call it. Yeah, my cousin-in-law. Michelle Hicks is joining us today. Michelle is an educator. She's based in the East Coast. Much of her focus in education is around TVI, Teachers for the Visually Impaired, a very niche focus from an education perspective, but I think something that's incredibly interesting and something very relevant. And really wanted to have her come on today and talk about, what's going on in her field of work and her field of study, talk a little bit about accessibility and education for blind and visually impaired students, and then maybe let's go into kind of what legislative and curriculum advancements that she'd like to see implemented for TVI. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Michelle Hicks. Michelle, what's going on, girl?
Nothing much, just having a nice day. This good afternoon, everybody. It's afternoon over here on the East Coast, and just chilling. Have cook out with my kids, and now I'm ready for this.
Oh, see, there you go. You start with the cookout. You make me jealous here on the West Coast. Y'all probably got something going. Your husband was probably, like you said, he was out there on his tractor, cutting the yard, making everything look right. That's all. That's all good. That's all good.
Yes, he was. He had a good time today cutting on his tractor, and just for everyone out there, we live in the suburbs, and we have a postage stamp of a front yard, but
Uh,
my husband doesn't have one of those, little riding lawnmowers. No, he has a full-on international harvester track farm
Man,
tractor.
I'm glad you made that clear too, right? I mean, so this, folks, this is just setting precedence for the folks that I'm dealing with here. Lord, pray for me, pray for Michelle. Yes, right. She's got, quarter acre or whatever, nice house. Little lawn, little something to take care of. But my cousin, Alan, show does have a full on farm equipped heavy duty tractor. Probably takes him two passes to cut the entire yard, and then Lord have mercy, y'all. I'm 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 gonna wish nothing but the best for you, but the man is happy. He's doing what he likes to do. If he stays out of your way, then even better, right? Even better.
And yes, and it's one of those things where I know where he is. So if
There
he
you go.
decides to cut random patches of field, there are other things he could be into.
That's true.
So
That's true. Amen for that. He's on lockdown, but he's cutting the grass. He's keeping everything nice and tight. That's all good.
yes,
So let's get into the topic today. First of all, again, I'm gonna say thank you for joining me today. And this is something that I'm interested in, just again because it's the mantra for ITN for infotainment news is timely, relevant news of the day. And I really think that what you focus on, again, from a TVI perspective, teachers for visually impaired, start off by telling us how and why you got into this particular field yourself.
well, I was blessed with growing up in a multi-generational household. So at one point, I had my great grandmother, my grandparents, my mother, and my sister and I, all in the same household. So my grandfather lost his vision. He during World War II, when he was in the army, they told him to make sure he read all the books he was ever going to read because he was going to lose his sight due to glaucoma.
Oh wow.
And as a young person, I only knew him as blind. As you know, by the time I came around, he that's all I ever knew, that he was blind. But
Hmm.
he had these books in his study, and they were full. There were no words in them. There were no pictures, but there were all these bumps in them and dots. And I remember just rubbing my hand over them and just loving the way they felt. I had no idea that that was Braille at the
Right.
time. Um, but fast forward, my mother-in-law also lost her vision due to diabetes. And I
Hmm.
remember one time sitting in the kitchen with her, and she was listening to an audiobook. but the speed she was listening was something that I'm like, can you understand what they're saying? And she could. And so when I was an undergrad, I became a special education teacher. So for most of my career, 20 years of my career, I worked with students who have learning disabilities and behavior disorders. And I had at least two students who did have a visual impairment. And
Okay.
one of their eyes was visually impaired. She was encouraging me. She said that there is a huge need for teachers of the visually impaired, and she encouraged myself and a few other teachers to try to get certified. And at the time, we needed to spend 2 weeks away at the School for the Deaf and the Blind. And at
Oh
that
wow.
point, um, my children were little. All three of them were little, so I couldn't have left my husband alone with three young
Yeah,
children.
don't
I
do
don't
that,
know what.
Lord. Don't do that. I'm just we won't go any
So,
further into that. We'll stay focused, but yeah, don't do that.
right. And so I did take one course, Braille, and I've always loved Braille. And that's why I made the connection of what those books were from my grandfather. But fast forward a few more years, a friend of mine had, called me who finished her TBI. She said, Michelle, your county needs two TBIs.
Mm,
This is the time. You need to go and do this. You have a guaranteed job already in your system. You just need to go take the classes. And at this point, there was a grant through George Mason
mhm.
University, and there was something called the Virginia Consortium for Sensory Impairment, where they were paying part of the way for educators in Virginia to become certified to teach visual impairment and other
Okay.
sensory impairments like hearing loss that is also they don't have a lot of teachers. So I was able to do all the coursework online. So I didn't
Oh,
have to
nice,
leave my
nice.
house.
Right.
So I could work and then I could come home and take classes. So it
Okay.
was the things happen. I know God is really good to me, and things happen when they're supposed to happen. So I started taking classes. My district, moved me over from being an inclusion math teacher to working with students that are visually impaired, and I absolutely love it. I'm not sure. Back before the world ended, I know Good Morning America
Before the world
had
went, I love that.
had done a small segment on the fact that there is a nationwide shortage of teachers of the visually impaired. So anyone out there listening, we need you, and it's a wonderful, wonderful you know teaching position. I love it.
I will actually, yeah, iterate that as well, right? I mean, you signed up to do the hard work, but you signed up to do the necessary work, right? I mean, love all the teachers, love everyone in education. My wife started in the classroom as well, and you started in the classroom, and that role, that occupation, that position, I couldn't do it. Look, I don't have enough patience just for myself, right? But so, and we won't even talk about the fact that you're not compensated financially as much as you is justified and what you should be. But to go into a totally different field just based on situations that you've had with your family, right? You saw your grandfather, you saw your mother-in-law go through these trials and go through these situations. And you said, you know what, I want to go help youngsters and kids that are
Yeah.
going through this as well, because you know that they're having a tougher time. Just being a kid and going through school is tough anyway, right? But when you have kind of these odds stacked against you as well, then that adds a little extra weight on the shoulder. So kudos and shouts out to you for again doing that hard work, signing up to do it. And you say it's been like your 20th year or so in this particular field.
This is I've been this is my 25th year of teaching.
Wow.
20 as working with students who are learning disabled and behavior disordered, and then the last 5 with children with blindness and visual impairment.
Okay. Okay. So what's changed in that time frame, right? Have
Wow.
resources have and well, yeah.
Wow.
Besides, as you say, when the world has stopped, But
Yeah.
what has changed, I guess, in terms of some of the accessibility and the tools that you have available to you from when you started? What do you see now in 2019 2020 that you have as capabilities that you can give to your students?
Technology has been uh, just such a blessing. I
Mm,
worked with a student when I started working with him. He was in fifth grade. And at that time, he had something, we call it a CCTV, but it's not really a closed circuit television. What it
mm,
is more of an electronic magnifier. So you can put books and papers under this and it magnifies it so it's nice and big because he's low vision so he can see. So he would sit behind this thing in the back of the room because that's where the plug was,
yeah.
and he would do work and his assistant would like take notes or tell him what they're doing. But he was very passive in his learning. It happened to him. So one of the things that I wanted and we got, especially because we're transitioning to middle school, was something called an ebot. And I call him Edgar. I named him Edgar, but Edgar the ebot was a distance magnifier. So imagine like a document camera.
Yeah.
So it's for a camera. So it would look, Edgar looks at the board and then sends a wireless to his wireless app on his iPad so he can see in real time what the teacher is doing. So
Oh,
if
that's
she's
amazing.
writing a problem on the board,
Yeah.
if she is showing you know, a beaker or whatever, he could see it. And the day, James, the day we got him that,
Yeah.
I almost cried because he said, that's what she's doing in the front of the room.
Oh.
This was a fifth grader.
It was like one of those, right? I mean, just a whole new
Yes,
one of those aha moments. Okay.
he was a fifth grader and never, ever had known what was going on. He couldn't visually see what the teacher and the other students were doing at the front of the room. So it was a game changer for him because
Yeah.
as we moved into middle school, he was able to take notes. He was able to see what everyone else was doing. And like I said, right to his iPad. And it was amazing.
Wow.
I remember one time I sat with him and he was copying notes because I want all my students, we want everyone to be as independent as possible. So he asked me, well, Miss Hicks, can you take my notes? And I said, no. And he gave me a death glare. And I said, I think you need to hurry up then. And he was able to, and so he was started taking notes. And I asked him, because I took a picture of what, the board was saying, just in case he missed anything for a
Hmm.
backup copy of notes. But I wanted him to know the responsibility was on him. And so I asked him, like, the next slide, I'm like, do you need anything? And he said, I got it. But he was able to keep up. The expectation was you need to take notes like everybody else. So
Right.
I remember this was sixth grade. So fast forward to ninth grade this past year, I was in class with him again, and the teacher was showing notes to the children, to the students, and he was sitting there doing nothing. And I was like, "What you doing?" And he's like, "I'm done." So other students with vision who had nothing wrong with them were still copying word for word. And I looked at his notes, and he did what a good student does. He read the sentence, and then
That's
put it
cool.
down in his own words.
That's
And
cool.
I'm like,
That's cool.
we got this. So yeah.
Now education is fun. Now that students enjoying learning instead of becoming a statistic who may have been left behind, right? Because that teacher, no fault of theirs, they probably got 20, 30 other students in the classroom. So when he was in sixth grade, but can't go necessarily. We want them to, but can't necessarily go and focus on that one individual. But now we
Right.
got the technology. Now they're able to see the math problems on the board. That's a pretty good story. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So okay, now let's throw the curve into it and talk about, as you say again, the world has come to a close or come to a halt. What are you doing now? I mean, are you
Woo!
Yeah, let's sit back and talk about it now. What differences are you doing preparing classrooms, your peers, other teachers, and maybe even some students if you've talked to them? How are you preparing to embrace learning during COVID?
Well, that was, I mean, COVID is, this was completely new to everyone. So
Yeah.
we were all thrust into a distance learning situation. One of my guests that I had on my podcast that I had interviewed was a college student who is studying to be a teacher of the visually impaired, and she herself is visually impaired. And she was saying the struggle that a lot of students with blindness and visual impairment, when they go to college, and after graduating, they struggle with the technology
Mm-hmm.
because there's there's a lot of difficult access as well as just learning new things.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to make sure, that my students were able to be independent. And instead of facing this issue when you're in college, when you don't have a TBI,
Right.
let's work on it now while you do have the support of the TBI. And a lot of like the same student I was working with, he had geometry this year. And I said, I'm sorry, we had geometry this year. And I'm including me. And bless her heart, he had a wonderful teacher. But when they were recording videos, she made videos and she said, okay, you're going to go here and make sure you click this. And then you're going to go here and then you're going to do that. And so he had no idea where here was. He had no
Yeah.
idea where there was. And it
Right.
wasn't like she was trying to be, she wonderful woman, so
Yeah.
wonderful teacher, but you don't necessarily always are mindful
Yeah. Out of
of.
sight, out of mind, kind of thing, right? Yeah. Mm.
So I would have him watch the videos, her teacher videos in geometry, because that's what you're supposed to do. And then I would ask him, because we were over Zoom, and so and over on our iPads,
Mm-hmm.
and he would say, I would ask him, did he understand what she was, what he had to do? And he said, no, I have no idea. So then I would have to go and watch the video. And I am not a math person. You can ask my husband and my children. I am not a math person. So I would have to then watch the videos, and then I would have to go and explain them to my student.
Okay.
So that's why I said we had geometry. Um, and some of the difficulties, like again, he uses an iPad, but things like Google Classroom, you can't pinch and zoom on Google Classroom. So when the
Oh
teacher is
wow. Okay.
giving information,
Yeah.
the notes of like what you're supposed to do, that's inaccessible to him. So instead of him being able to be independent student, he had to wait for me, for our Zoom time in order for him to be able to, understand what he needed to do. So those are the kind of things that now is the time to learn the accessibility features
Yeah.
of things like Canvas. I know they're like switching platforms where I'm living. I mean, my county from Google Classroom to Canvas. So it's now time to learn those things. Just preparing my students for self-advocacy, because again, you're home. If no one's going to make you do something, and you're a kid, if no one's
Right.
going to make you do anything, you're not going to do it. So
That's
if
true.
something is
Yeah.
difficult, then people are going to less likely to do it. I had a young lady that I worked with, and they had labeled her, she was visually impaired, but they also labeled her emotionally disabled.
Hmm.
And when I met her, she was a sweetheart. And here in Virginia, we have the standards of learning. We did not do Common Core. We have the standards of learning. So she needed like X amount of credits, probably like I think 13 or 14 verified credits in order to graduate. This was her
Okay.
second year as a senior, and she had zero. And I'm
Wow.
like, I remember sitting in the meeting, and I am very positive and very let's try. But I'm like, should we look at GED? Because there is no way in the world this baby girl is
You're not
going
gonna
to
catch up. Yeah. You're not gonna
all
make
this,
it.
you know,
Yeah.
in 1 year.
Yeah.
Well, she and I worked. we started working, and I'm like, well, why weren't you doing the work on the computer? They had put her on the computer to do work. And she said, Miss Hicks, I can't see it. She couldn't see the cursor. And she hated computers because she couldn't see the mouse. So there are accessibility features built into computers. And I said, give me a shot. And I was able to teach her how to make the cursor big, how to make it, it'll do a little ding as far as like a little flash of where the cursor is. And she was able to be like, oh, James, she walked across that stage in June because
On
she
time.
passed all her SOLs.
On time. You know, that's struck me when you said that. I mean, yeah, so we've got all these mobile devices. We got phones, laptops, desktops, and all this, and they have these accessibility tabs. Yeah, should not take those for granted and should be aware of those. But you brought up something, and I almost wonder. I don't know if I'm gonna put you on the spot here, but I touched on it in the intro. From a legislation perspective, is anything being done to not forget these students? Right. I mean, is there some bills or some documents in the halls of Congress or legislative or the representatives that specifically address the visually impaired and the blind and education and things of that?
Well, we just finished back in July. We just had the 30th anniversary of the American with Disabilities Act, and
Yeah.
within that act, our things not only need to be accessible, like physical, like getting into buildings and having ramps.
Yeah.
You need to have things need to be visually. Websites need to have. There's a criteria that all websites are supposed to um, use and be, and have. So the laws are there on the books,
Yeah.
but not everyone adheres to those because it takes a little bit more. Just like if you think about it, like you'll have a physical building and the ramp is all the way in the back in the alley. And just because there's a ramp doesn't mean that and it's accessible, doesn't mean that it's user friendly. Doesn't mean, we were in, bless our hearts, we were in a school that was built probably in the 40s or 50s. And I prayed every time we got in the elevator. I mean, it was an elevator and it was accessible, but I was like, I don't know if we're going to make it up the stairs, up the elevator.
Yeah.
So the American with Disability Act tells us and tells businesses that everything needs to be accessible, but not everyone does it.
Well, I'm sitting there, as you were talking, I'm sitting here writing notes. I will make sure that Infotainment News has accessibility functionality and features turned on. Again, not, and that's really why we're having this conversation, right? It was never an oversight, but again, it's something that everyone is not as aware of as they should be, right? Let's be cognizant and let's be compassionate to our fellow brother and sister. And, if, yeah, the ramps are great. Yeah, the railings are good. But accessibility to folks with hearing loss, vision loss, whatever the case may be, let's make sure that they have equal rights or equal access to facilities and services as well. So, yeah, I'm literally writing down some notes right now to make sure that my site is accessible. So I've got homework. Go ahead.
And a lot of it is things that are super simple. Like I had teachers who they'll give a worksheet and I'm like, can we get an electronic copy? Because again, my students can take it on their iPad and make it bigger for them. If it's a Word document that they created, oh my goodness, do you know you can select all the copy and change it from a 12-point font to a 20-point font? And it does it, and that's completely free and easy. So those are the kind of things, and it's not, and I know people, I truly believe that there's good, they're good in people and people are good. It's just people don't know what they don't know.
Exactly.
And it's, so it's one of those things. I know I've had, my parents, I was in an IEP meeting and the mother was just so stressed out because her child who had been a preemie, because that's often when preemies are given oxygen, it can damage their eyes. she was concerned that her child was struggling. And she had an iPhone, and when I asked, and she's like, he's always so close to it. And I said, can I see your phone? And she gave me her phone. I went into the accessibility, part, made the font bigger, and she was like, I didn't know. She started crying because she thought she had done something wrong. And I said, no,
Right.
darling, you just don't know what you don't know. And
Yeah.
if you don't need those things, James, the saddest part, again, I work with students, and one of the things with the vision field, you can work from birth all the way till death. I mean, because eventually, if we live long enough, you're gonna lose some vision, and you're gonna need me.
Right.
But so many times, our older members of our communities will go to the doctor, find out that they might have diabetes or glaucoma, and they're losing their vision, and that's the end. And they think that's the end. They aren't able to cook. They aren't able to do their the hobbies that they like. But there are low vision devices that will help you do anything and everything. If
Yeah.
you don't know and no one tells you, then you sit and people sit and in the dark and lose their vision because no one has ever told them that they can get a magnifier at
Right.
home. They can get, large print, oh goodness, like measuring cups. And
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
sad.
Well, I'll put it back on the screen here. My dad is watching, and he chimed in with this statement earlier, and he's currently going through treatment for glaucoma. So he's definitely taking advantage of services that are available to him. So to Hicks Senior, there, don't sit in the dark, brother. You got resources, and you can always call Michelle. She's got all the
Definitely.
insights to help. Let's pivot slightly and let's talk. You already talked a little bit about it, but let's talk about your podcast, which is now in its successful, was that second season. I've listened to a handful of episodes. Talk to us a little bit about what you're doing with that, right? The folks that you're interviewing, the topics that you're having, and where others can actually access that as well.
Well, my podcast is called TBI Talks with Michelle. And like the little thing it says, the aim is to support teachers of the visually impaired. We had talked about that there's a shortage. There's a generation of TBIs that are retiring now, and the field is being filled, which is to a point, which is with not younger, newer TBIs. But that generation, we're losing their information, their knowledge, and really, we want to make sure that kind of we do what we I wanted to build a community of practice. I wanted to build a support. As a TBI, I am an itinerant teacher, so it means I travel from school to school. So I
Okay.
spend a lot of time in my car. So last year I discovered podcasts. I'm not really a talk radio person, and I didn't really, I listened to podcasts, but I found a podcast on sewing, which was, I love to sew. It's a great podcast. And it was amazing because as traveling from school to school, I was learning sewing techniques and I was learning new patterns to, fill out. I was like, I wonder if there's one for teachers with visually impaired. So
Right.
I tried to search on, you know, um, Apple Podcast, and there really wasn't anything that stuck out to me. And so I'm one of those people where I'm like, I wonder if I could do that. So I decided to create this podcast, and to help the next generation of teachers. One of the things, I don't know, James, if you knew, Alan taught for you. My husband, Alan, your cousin, taught for a
Mm-hmm.
year. He
Yes.
taught, and he was a really good first year teacher. He connected with the kids, but he wasn't given the support from the administration and from the people in his department. So he taught for 1 year. And research shows a lot of new teachers, because he was a career switcher. So a lot of new teachers, a lot of career switchers will stay in the classroom for 2 to 3 years, and then they leave. They run in droves. We're losing teachers because they're not given support. So since
Okay.
I hated what they did to my husband, I hated it,
Mm-hmm.
hated it, hated it. As a classroom teacher, I always sought out the new teachers in special ed. Like, come on, I'm your mentor. I'm not getting any money. I'm not getting any professional development points, but it's not going to happen on my watch what they did to my husband. So
I
come
love it.
on, you're going to learn how to, you need to have a question, ask me. Because like for him, they had the person who was evaluating him was also his mentor. So if you have a dumb question,
Wow. Hmm.
you're not going to want to go to the person who's going to evaluate you.
Yeah.
So I'm like, come talk to me. I had wonderful mentees. They're both two of my favorite ones have, flourished in the classroom. One's moved down to admin, but they're still in the education field. So I love my mentees. I love my PIC, if she's watching. But so that's what I wanted to do for TBIs. Because again, we spend a lot of times in our cars. Let's, learn something going in between schools.
Makes
So
sense.
I really believe in connections with people and building, a community and building friends. So I had teachers of the visually impaired I work, and I called us the VI squad. I even made us t-shirts. And
Okay. I love
So,
it.
um, so we would be able to call and like, hey, have you ever gotten, read aloud for the SAT for a visually
Hmm.
impaired kid?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I did that last week. Because with teachers of the visually impaired, I can work from 2 all the way up to 22, with 2-year-olds all the way up to 22.
Okay.
So if I don't if I haven't had a student who's a senior, then I don't know, some of the things that seniors, need. But I could call and text, my friend, um, and to just ask a question. So that's the kind of community that I wanted to build with my podcast. So been so blessed with just talking to TVIs. My first interview was with my coworker, one of my best buddies. I knew she wasn't going to say no. But often, when you're meeting with your friends, you're talking about your families and how you're doing. But to have a focused conversation about our field,
Yeah.
I have learned more. It's just amazing. So then I just started branching out and asking, random TVIs. So I've had TVIs from across the country. I've had some in California. I have an interview. I just had an interview with someone in Oregon.
Nice.
So I love being able to talk to different people with different experiences, and that's what it all is. We're learning. We're learning from each other.
Definitely. That's amazing. So, if anything is positive come out of this whole lockdown thing, right? And kind of as we were saying off screen, I've been able to lock in and get my network going. But the fact that you're continuing to focus on your podcast and able to reach out to folks globally, right? So I mean, yeah, not just in your 5 mile radius or whatever the case may be, but you've got West Coast, East Coast, North and South. So I think that's amazing. That's phenomenal. It's all about the community. So I'll keep this on here, and I'll definitely add it in the show notes so folks can subscribe to TVI Talks with Michelle.
And what's interesting, how Apple, well, the where I focus my podcast,
Yeah.
they'll do, demographics. So
Yes.
I got so excited. I have a listener in Tanzania. I'm like, that
Love
is
it.
so
That's
cool.
pretty cool. That's pretty.
And he or she has been listening for it like since the beginning. And I'm like, that is so cool. So I have listeners in Tanzania. I have one in Asia, because it'll tell you like what continent
Right.
people are listening. I have someone in Europe, and it's just like that's just amazing to me.
All right. So share this with them and get their address and Send them some swag.
I have to send them swag. I'm
Yeah,
like,
send them a T-shirt or something, right? And then have them, and then you can post that on Instagram or something like that. So let me ask you this. That's a lot of stuff you're doing, right? You're teaching possibly kids 2 to 22. You've got 3 kids. True, they're adults now.
yes.
You got a man outside in the front yard on the tractor that you got to keep an eye on.
Lord knows I do.
Yeah, right. And you went back to school. So talk to us a little bit about grad school because I mean that's no small chore, right? Just talk to us a little bit about the time constraint of that and how that's going right now and what your field of study is for your master's or for your graduate program.
Well, actually, I would start not this next week, but the following week. So on the 17th, classes start, and I will be pursuing my PhD in special education. So
I heard that. Hold on. Let's say that one more again. Hold on, one more again. I want to make sure that we get that let that resonate. What are you gonna do again, Michelle?
I will be starting my coursework for pursuing my PhD in special education. So, and thank you. I have wanted to get my PhD since I was an undergrad. I went to Hampton University, and at that point, I was surrounded by wonderful professors. And I knew again at that point that I wanted to help prepare the next generation of special education teachers.
Hmm.
So, money is always a thing. And, you know, and when I graduated from college, I wanted to start. I was so tired, kind of tired of school. So I wanted to start. So I graduated in May. Alan and I got married on the 19th. We're going to celebrate 25 years
Hmm.
in 2 weeks, in a few weeks, or a week, 10 days actually. Woohoo!
Oh Lord,
And
she don't
so,
know when the anniversary is. See what I'm saying? I ain't got nothing to do
and
with it.
um, and I start so we got married on Saturday, and I had to report to new teacher training on Monday. We did not have a honeymoon.
Wow.
And by I think October, I found out we were pregnant, expecting our first child.
Yeah.
So life just took off, and it was and it's a wonderful life. I've loved my life. And when I went back to get my master's, I got my master's in reading. The kids were young. I think it was 20 07 06 07.
Okay.
And Alan did a really good job of taking over, helping, making sure, so I was able to go to class. So that was hard, but it was fine. So now, like you said, I have 3 adults. I don't have children, I have 3 adults. And it's funny, James, they had sent an email around about a program that would call the Prize Scholarship, and that there was a grant looking for encouraging teachers to get their PhDs in special education because there's a
Okay.
shortage. And I got the email. You get like tons of emails a
Hmm.
day. I
Yeah.
deleted the email because I
Oh
had
my
time.
goodness.
I didn't
They
even
try
read
to
it.
give you they try to give you some free money, free training, and you just file out in the circular bin, didn't you? Oh my
And I
Lord.
just deleted it. And I never delete email. And I just deleted it. And my friend Crystal, she sent me like the next day, this is for you. And so I was like, hey, and then I opened it and read what it was. I'm like, oh, this is for me. um, and so I just decided, let's do this. Let's try. And things have, I've been, since undergrad, I was terrified. I'm not a good test taker as far as standardized testing.
Yeah.
So I was terrified of the GRE. And I'm from undergrad. So from 1990, I was terrified of the GRE. Luckily, when I went to get my master's, I could do the Miller's and Malachi's test. But
Yes.
the test was what they needed to get into Virginia Commonwealth University for this program. And when I met with a phone interview, they gave me a target score. So not only do I have to take this test,
Yeah.
I
Tell
have
you.
to get I have to get a target score.
You got to get pretty high. Okay.
So I was terrified, but I was just like, all I can do is try. So I, within a week, registered for it and took it. I studied a little bit, but I mean, it was a week. I missed it, the mark, probably by 7 points,
Oh,
and I was sad. And my
yeah.
husband he's a huge encourager. He was just like, Michelle, you always take the test twice. So you'll take it twice. He was like, you'll take it another time. You'll have time. You'll have a whole month to study because, the test is not cheap. So I paid for the first one. He paid for the second,
Mm-hmm.
me to take it the second time. And he was just like, you got this. And he's like, if you had a week and got that close, imagine after, you have a time to study. And James, there's a way. I mean, I just didn't know that there was a way to study for those tests. And I
Mm-hmm.
studied, I learned, I love YouTube. YouTube is my like best friend. And just found video after video on it. I'm like, oh, there's a way to take this test. James, when the score flashed up, because you get your score immediately,
Right.
I burst into tears because I was 10 points over.
You're like,
And
this
that's
can't be right. These numbers are high right here. These numbers right? I love it.
and I'm sure people thought that I was crazy because I was in there sobbing. But I was just so proud of myself. And I was like,
Yeah.
even if I don't get in the program, I've conquered a fear.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
is what life is about. So I like that story as far as this is what I'm supposed to do. So I'm getting I'm going to pursue my PhD in
Mm-hmm.
special education, and my focus is going to be visual impairment. That's where I'm going to do my research.
Okay.
Because there's lots of things to research, especially now with accessibility. All of this is new, distance learning and doing those kind of things. So it's just been a blessing. So I'm so excited. So
Hey, that's an amazing story. Congratulations on that part. So let me. Is it Hampton or are you going to VCU for your
I'm
studies?
going to VCU. Hampton
Okay.
was Hampton was
Okay.
my undergrad.
Okay.
And
All
it's
right.
funny because when they're asking, like, what do you want to do with your degree? One of the things I really want to do with my degree, like I said, I learned how to do special ed at Hampton University, which is a historically Black college or
Mm-hmm.
university. They're saying there's a discrepancy. There are less special ed teachers of color that are coming into the field. Well,
Hmm.
at Hampton University, there's no longer a special education department. It vanished. And that's one of the things I really want to do. I want to get that started because you have a whole generation of African American students who are going to a college who don't even have the opportunity to major
No.
in special education or to
No.
get endorsed in special education. So that's one of the things I really want to do.
Look, I'm not gonna say anything else. You know what, I'm gonna leave it right there on cloud nine. Look, you phenomenal story about passing your GRE. Little shout out to Alan there too. We'll give him a couple of cool points there. I won't be so hard on him next time I talk to him. That definitely supportive man, supportive family, and the fact that again you are doing the hard work, planning on going back and giving back to the communities in need. That's just a great story, and we support you 120%. Michelle, I thank you for joining me today. Hope this was fun, right?
This was, yes, it was a
Good,
lot of fun.
good. I mean, again, it's a statement or a conversation topic that not everyone is as aware of as we probably should be. We know or we've heard of accessibility. We know about certain aspects, ADA. We know about the buttons on our phones and on our laptops. But again, how does that affect the student in class that's sitting in the middle or the back of the room who, damn, can't see the chalkboard, right, and is having issues? Are there folks that are out there to help that student get better and prepared and succeed? And the answer to that obviously is yes. And you are definitely one of those people. So thank you again for everything that you do.
Thank you. And I know finish on one thing. I know you're out there, with Google and Facebook and all those people who make apps.
Yeah.
Accessibility. Remember my babies. Remember those first people with blindness or visual impairments, because we need the same access. They need the same access as everyone else. So when you're designing your apps, when you're designing things with Google, fix the classroom so
I
we can
I like,
get
what,
bigger.
when I get out of lockdown and I can go down the road back to Facebook, HP, Google, Dell, and all those companies, I will make sure some kind of way I'll integrate accessibility into the pitches that I give. I'm gonna do my part, right? I'm gonna do more than just talk about it. I'm gonna be about it. So, on that note, Michelle, thank you again for joining me on this edition of ITN Live. For those who tuned in, hopefully you saw the link for her podcast. Again, I will put that in the show notes so you can have availability to that. And it's not just on Apple, right? It's kind of syndicated across multiple podcast platforms.
So iHeartRadio as well as Spotify.
Nice. See, that you where you need to be. You where you need. So there's no excuse. All right, folks. There's no excuse. You have access. You have the accessibility to the accessibility podcast. I saw the jokes I got. I'm not good at it right now. All right, so appreciate you. Thank you very much, you guys. Thank you again for joining in. We will see you and talk to you very soon. Peace.
And thank you for having me.